Imagine a country that's run like a startup. A country where everything that's new in the digital world is not only tested but also implemented. Where the internet is a basic human right and where everyone has a virtual presence. Well, this country exists and it's called Estonia. What will the world look like when we have, next to the regular citizens, virtual inhabitants as well? Coming up on this episode.
This is the really serious conversations happen here. It also doubles as a meeting room.
I think that Estonia is positioning itself to be the kind of cyber capital of Europe in this sense of the place that is best for e-commerce.
This is Backlight. Welcome to the digital frontier. All the way up in the northeastern tip of Europe, on the Russian border, we find Estonia, land of pine forests, vodka and tranquil lakes. But in recent years, it has also been the land of successful startups such as Skype and Transferwise. Estonia aims to be Europe's Silicon Valley. It all started with a government that decided to create the first e-nation back in the 1990s. All 1.3 million inhabitants of Estonia have a digital identity. Recently, registration for e-residency was opened up to all citizens of the world. You don't have to live in Estonia to become one of its digital residents.
So, this is where it all started for me. I got my e-residency in this very nondescript looking building. And it's where I applied. It's where I got did my background check, or at least the police did it. And then I returned to pick up the card from this same building.
Hamid Tasildos was one of the first to apply for a virtual residency. He may rightly be called a world citizen. His parents are from Iran. He has lived in Los Angeles all his life, and 4 months ago, he became an e-resident of Estonia. Working as an engineer for Skype, he travels all over the world.
Ciao.
But he's often to be found at Skype's headquarters in Tallinn.
In my life, I travel, both for work and for pleasure. When I want to do something digital and be a citizen of the world and participate with the rest of the world, e-residency lets me do that. Hey guys. My passport, my US passport might let me travel places, which is cool. But to leverage those services when I'm, for example, hanging out in Japan, but I want to sign a document for work that's here in Estonia, doesn't matter where I am and where I want to conduct business, the e-residency card lets me do that.
In Estonia, you're entitled to a digital identity document from the minute you're born. When Estonia announced its plan to offer this option to non-Estonians, Hamid was among the first to apply.
I spend so much time here that I'm always that guy who can't, for example, transfer funds between friends. So if we go on a camping trip, everyone can pay each other by transferring money through bank accounts easily. I'm the guy who's sort of, okay, what do you do with the guy with the US account? The minute I heard there was an option to do it, and I didn't have to be the awkward guy out of the loop, it was more like, why not? A friend of mine, Karim, he was there to snap the pic.
So you look very happy there.
I was excited, yeah, it was a really cool day.
So I guess I want to go this way.
This way?
Yeah, because I'd get on right there, down by here, straightforward. See on Uhexa? See on Uhexa? Like that? Cool thing about this card is it hooks up to my e-residency, so I can top off my my transportation card online.
I can't imagine anyone would find it in their interest to not be part of this kind of revolution.
However, the very first e-resident can be found in England, land of traditions and ancient values. This is where Edward Lucas lives and works as a journalist. Lucas has a long history with Estonia. In 1992, when he was a BBC correspondent, He witnessed Estonia becoming independent. His first son was born there, and Lucas became personal friends with the Estonian president.
This is the president here welcoming us all.
For us in Estonia, we are taking a new step today, a new era in Estonian e-governance.
Well, I flew to Tallinn. I was number one, so it was all a bit different for me. I got champagne and cake and speeches from the president and so on. So I've always wanted one, but I wasn't Estonian. I didn't live there. But then I heard they were thinking of maybe one day giving them to non-residents. And so I said to the president of Estonia, don't give me a medal. Although I'm a great friend of your country's, what I really want is the first of these ID cards. And he said yes. And so I was very pleased last year to get digital ID 0001.
What kind of practical advantages do you get when you have an e-residency?
Well, for a start, I can send emails that can only come from me. This is like a signed email in a way that it's really hard to do that on the internet, to send an email and someone can be absolutely sure it comes from you. Secondly, I can send an encrypted document and I can receive an encrypted document. I can sign a document, so instead of having to sign something with a pen, fold it up, find an envelope, get a stamp, put it in the post, I can just sign a document right here on my computer right now. And that has the force of law. If I've signed it with my card reader in the machine and I've used my PIN number, that is a legal signature anywhere in the EU, and it's as good as if I'd given what we call a wet signature, one with pen and ink.
So if I want to sign a document, I first need to just insert the card. Cool. I must come in here and enter the correct PIN.
That's what makes it secure.
Yep. And that's it. I've signed a document. It took 3 clicks. And I think that long-term, more and more businesses or people who want to go into opening a business for themselves should really look into this. If you want to conduct business in Europe, I don't know what kind of paperwork and processes involved in that, in the traditional sense, but in the sense of what's available today digitally, this is the way to do it.
So this is like your virtual passport?
Yep.
Is that how you can view it?
Yeah, except I can't use it, of course, to
go through
travel.
customs?
Yes, I think if I showed this at Frankfurt, they might laugh at me.
But on the internet, I mean, in cyberspace?
Yeah, exactly. It is exactly a way to say, this is Hamid, and he's doing some action. And it's really him, not just someone pretending to be him.
I think Estonia has done a really good job in spotting that it can become kind of the back office to the world for all this boring stuff that people don't go into business because they want to make bank transfers. They make bank transfers because they're in business. And if Estonia says we can make your banking operations anywhere in the European Union really cheap and easy, even though you're sitting in Hong Kong, that's great.
So if this works, then a lot of branches will have to be afraid of losing business.
I would be really scared if I was a notary in the European Union at the moment. I would think this is going to put me out of business.
Banks as well, perhaps?
Old-fashioned banks, yes. And
many other kind of intermediate kind of services.
Yes.
You have to think twice now.
Well, I think if you're a provider of weak identity services, which is what notaries are, then you're going to be put out of business by someone who produces something that's better and cheaper. And I think that governments will be competing on this, and I'm sure Estonia isn't the last country in Europe which is going to say we offer e-services to e-residents.
President Toomas Hendrik Ilves is the driving force behind Estonia's digital ambitions. As a radical student leader and a reporter for Radio Free Europe, he was always focused on the West and had a keen eye for everything to do with the internet.
Everyone's been talking for 25 years about the information highway, right? Huge Autobahn. The problem is where we are today is that everyone on that is driving without a license plate. But if you are going to be dealing with things that involve your security, your privacy, then the way to actually maintain that is you need a driver's license, or at least a license plate on the car. So when it's your car, we know it's your car. It's not someone else who's pretending to be you.
An identity.
You need an identity. I don't say it doesn't have to be a card, but you need a secure, verifiable identity. If you want to have real security online. It goes back to this old cartoon. There are 2 dogs. and one dog says to the other, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. I would argue that is the problem of the internet, is that no one knows if you're a dog.
An account on some social media site that's not really going to prove who I am.
Like a Facebook page or Google Plus or...
Exactly. Anybody can make an online social media presence. I think any 13-year-old with a computer is easily able to do that. But this is a bit more sophisticated. This is having a sort of certificate authority, having a central place identify you and extend your presence really from wherever you are in the world to the internet in a way that validates you, as opposed to being a fake account you created somewhere, hypothetically.
So is this where we are heading to? That people can pick and choose the government that they like best? You can have a menu almost of what government you would like to become a resident of?
Yes, I think we are moving towards a competitive market in digital identities where you can have a very cheap digital identity, which is your Facebook page, your Facebook identity, which costs you nothing but proves very little. You can have something that's slightly more elaborate, like your credit card, but then even that doesn't really prove who you are. It just shows that someone's applied for a credit card in your name, but that gives you more scope. Or you can go for something like this, a biometrically checked, government authenticated ID card, and that's a very powerful tool. So this is really the electronic equivalent of a Swiss bank account.
After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Estonia formed a new government in 1992. The political elite that helped to set up this new nation had an average age of below 30. It was a young generation that was not afraid of technology and had grown up with computers. Siim Sikkut was one of them. He is currently one of the most important government advisors in the field of IT.
So this is the cabinet room. So this is where each week our cabinet, the ministers meet. And well, this is also for us the heart of our digital government, because let's say this is where it all started for us 15 years ago. We had a prime minister who said, look, if we want the whole of society, the whole of public sector to use technology to the best, then we have to show the way. So even as ministers, as cabinet, we have to do things in a paperless way to do everything digital. So now, yeah, from a point when a draft law is started up to when it becomes a law in parliament, that all happens online, paperless, easy, efficient manner. And so, yes, this is where they come. Each week the ministers sit down, no papers, just an iPad, phone, laptop, whatever they choose, whatever they want to bring, and they do their work. They don't even have to be here physically, but they still prefer to get together once a week to chat and decide things. Right?
So this table could be empty and they could all log in?
So in that sense, the table could be empty, but the reason why it's so effective is that it's actually also used for preparation.
Yeah.
So when the Prime Minister sits down at the table, already actually the night before, all the ministers have noted, what points are okay with them and what points they want to discuss. So everything that's okay for everybody does not get open and discussed.
So it takes much less time, I would say.
Exactly, and that's the gain. So it used to be that we had cabinet sessions, 3, 4, 5 hours. Now it's let's say 40, 50 minutes maximum.
This government is developing all kinds of new services. It is creating a digital supermarket offering many electronic services such as e-voting, e-parking, e-health, e-welfare and e-police. Electronic citizenship is the latest niche in the world market, and Estonia owns it.
Most of the things that we've done right in Estonia is because some kid somewhere thinks, wow, wouldn't that be cool to do that? And then he comes up with the idea and we say, yeah, that's really cool. Why don't we do it? I mean, I'm not, I don't know anything. I mean, but I'm very receptive to people saying, why don't we do this? I go, yeah, let's try. I mean, what's wrong with the idea? Okay, this may be wrong, that may be wrong. We'll fix it up as we go. And but when this idea came, I said, but why don't we do this? I mean, why be stuck in this 19th century paper world? We don't have to be. I mean, we've already done the Skype, we've already done e-identity. I mean, it all works, and it's all much cooler than the old way of doing things. So this e-residency idea, it's like, yeah.
What will the world look like when you have virtual residents next to the regular citizens? We asked Martin Kavats, city planner, free thinker and curator of the Architecture Biennale in Tallinn.
So, Martin, what will Estonia or the world look like in 20 years' time?
I'm pretty sure that the world will look quite a lot different than it does today. The next 20 years will be particularly interesting for me because I'm an architect, city planner, that most of these big changes are also changing the way people behave. And if people start to behave differently in space, this means that the actual space, the city itself, becomes also quite different. For example, the possibility of having a self-driving car on a street is quite different than the transportation system we are using now, because if we don't need to steer anymore, then it is obvious that life becomes different.
You have 1.3 Estonians living here, but in a few years' time you will have tens of millions of e-residents living here as well.
Yes, it definitely will have an impact. Like the e-residency is a vision. It doesn't have, nobody knows exactly what it will lead up to and what exactly are the tools that we are going to use. We are starting to just invent them. The e-residency will become a reality in 10 years. It will take time. It's not a fast process.
What does it do to a country to suddenly acquire millions of virtual e-residents? What are the consequences for the role of the state?
Your people will not only be the 1.3 citizens in the future, your people will be 1.3 plus so many million e-residents.
Well, yes and no, because the political, as a democracy, it's the citizens of the country that make the political decisions through elections. If you don't live here, your mother or father is not Estonian, you don't speak the language, you're not going to be a citizen.
But in the future you will have millions of e-residents.
But they'll be residents, but they cannot affect the political process.
So they're outside of the democratic system.
Right, it's a service.
We are doing this in a way like startup mode. So I'm very honest to say that we don't know the full outcome of it. Of course, we're hoping that it could be disruptive. We were very happy with that, and sort of we are thinking about the ways to do it this way. But at the same time, we don't know really the full outcome. So we don't know whether we'll be sort of exactly attracted to 10,000, 1 million, 10 million or more of the people in the end. So it's a bit, let's say, exactly like a startup. We are aiming for the next immediate target, but with a vision of larger, but no real end goal in sight, right?
This is an administration that thinks in terms of targets and long-term as well as short-term prognoses. The notion of citizens is replaced with clients, and the aim is to serve a global market.
In Estonia, sometimes the bureaucratical language uses the words client for a pupil. The teacher is a service provider and the pupil is a client. This is totally absurd. And for example, if there is a patient, and the doctor is also a service provider and a client.
But how come Estonia has this kind of mindset?
Basically, it comes because when we regained our independence in 1991, then the mindset was to get as far from communism as possible. So at that point of time, it was kind of logical solution.
When a state starts to behave like a startup, all kinds of questions emerge. Civil rights activist Mart Stoor has some too.
I think the word startup has become pretty much, has almost become meaningless. What it means is basically you can do whatever the hell you want and then say, oh, oops, it didn't work out, and you start again. In certain ways, that's the way you should be doing it. You should try over and over and over again until you hit the nail. But when we're talking about government, then I don't think government should behave like a startup. Because startups usually they have a very short life period. They work until a certain moment and then they become real corporations and so on and on. Do we want our government to turn into a corporation? I don't think so. Do we want it to behave like companies set up by 3 or 4 universities graduates? No, I don't think so. But the idea on its own is great.
Markets are there to be conquered. That's what all young Estonians are taught, In special incubators sponsored by the government, young entrepreneurs hatch new ideas on how to become the next Skype. They are drilled in learning to speak the language of the market, and they're taught the best ways to squeeze money out of rich investors.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 21st Seed Forum process in Tallinn. The agenda for the last minute brief tonight is first to run through the preparations of your 7-minute full pitch. What is so game-changing, disruptive, and wow with what you do, so investors need to fly to Tallinn and invest in you immediately. You need to look into the investor's eye, deep down in their pockets, right, and get the money out, okay? That is your exercise tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, the next exciting investment opportunity today is Bayex from the great city of Tallinn. The company is being presented by its Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Christoph Neumann. Welcome to Seed Forum.
Thank you, Steinar. So I want you to imagine you have just completed your favorite physical activity. And notice how sweaty you are. You may know the sweat is not just a waste product and acts as a cooling system. But what you may not know is that sweat contains many chemicals, proteins, and hormones that reveal what's going on inside the body.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next exciting investment opportunity in Seed Forum Tallinn this morning is Comfy from Tartu. The company is being presented by its Chief Operating Officer, Ksenia Vinogradova. Welcome to Tallinn.
Thank you, Senior. Comfy is the first device that makes window blinds.
Sorry, I'm stopping you. Could you start all over with double the energy? I can't hear you.
Thank you, Senator. Comfy is the first device that makes window blinds smart and energy bills small.
Could you tell us what you're doing with not more than 15 words, please?
Yeah, we're changing the way kids engage in education while they're on their everyday screen time.
We're analyzing biomarkers found in sweat for training optimization and health monitoring.
Thank you for getting the hands out of the pocket. Thank you. Could you tell us your most important 3, 4, 5 value drivers, arguments why to invest in you?
Okay. The most important is that we are already in business.
Yes.
We have high margins.
Yes.
Recurring revenues.
Super. Yes.
We have a scalable business model with recurring revenue. We're targeting lucrative fitness, health, and wellness markets. And our non-invasive technology will get the interest from the big players in the wearable health sector.
Do you think you well now presented your team and why you will succeed?
Yeah.
Do you think you well now presented your niche of the market?
Yeah.
Do you think you well now presented your competitive advantages?
Yeah.
Do you think you well now presented your uniqueness in terms of IP?
Somewhat.
Yeah. And do you think you well now presented your exit route for investors?
I showed it.
You show it. Okay, all right. You have an audience typically of financial investors, meaning, generally speaking, an audience of middle-aged men in dark suit with a tie. And they think numbers and they crush numbers. And they're getting as old as me, Ksenia, so they even hear badly. So you need to talk loud, right? Thank you. We have 2 exciting companies, if I understand correctly, Randall to go, and we have 1 more smaller company, is that right?
Where do you see yourself in a few years' time?
On a beach.
On the beach?
Yeah. So I grew up in California, and moving back to Estonia is not easy with no beach. So the beach is always on my mind.
So you're from the States, actually?
I'm born here, moved away very, very young, and then most of my life in California, yes.
You know all about Silicon Valley then, and what's happening there?
Everyone always says, why did you leave California to come here? But obviously it's a great place.
But you think something like what happened in Silicon Valley could happen here in Estonia?
To a certain extent. Obviously less people, less money, but as far as we could push Estonia, yes, why not? Everyone always says Estonians are hard workers. We have the young people growing up in IT who really see that there are problems everywhere and try to solve them. So before on the trolley and right here, this is the old Estonia, but now welcome to the new Estonia.
Estonia has proved itself many times over as a game changer. It's no coincidence that this is the country for disruptive technology businesses like Kazaa or Skype, which tripped up the international telephone market.
Be surprised at how many words you can actually make with Transferwise. It's amazing. Yeah, it really is amazing. Who knew?
The next Skype, however, is in London, Transferwise, established by 2 young Estonian entrepreneurs. TransferWise found a smart way to disrupt the revenue model of the international money transfer business.
I had a good job here, and my problem was that my savings account and my mortgage was still back at home, so I had to send money from my bank here to my bank in Estonia every month or every couple of months. And I did it first, and I was surprised that some money goes missing on the way. And then I started looking into this and realized that this is what the banks do. So you put money in on one side and less arrives on the other side. And the way that they do it is that they take a margin on the currency conversion. So there's a trick in the currency conversion. And at the same time, I had a friend who had exact opposite problem. So he was working for Skype at the time, and he moved to London to live and work here. But his salary was still paid in Estonian euros. Yeah. So he had to move his euros from Tallinn to his bank in London. So what we started doing was, I just put my pounds onto his account here in London, and he put his euros onto my account in Estonia.
Kristo Kärman, a formal financial expert with Deloitte, and Taavet Henriques, one of the first people employed by Skype, both quit their jobs to set up their own business based on this idea.
So we're working in multiple different offices. It's quite important for us to remain connected, and this is where we have big team meetings. We all gather around in this space, and there are spaces in the Tallinn side where they gather, and we can have our whole company meeting online. Then of course it's a tradition that you need to have a sauna. The really serious conversations happen here. It also doubles as a meeting room. We calculated that we had saved about $10,000 just in bank fees by the time, and we were quite, happy about ourselves. And I had been working for banks in the UK during that time, and I realized that the banks are not going to change. So this is not going to go away. This problem is real. Yeah. And we figured out that if it works for us, for me and my co-founder and a small group of people, we could make it work why can't we make it work for everyone?
Just like phone calls, music and travel, the old world's been flipped on its head. Welcome to TransferWise. Built by the brains behind Skype, backed by Sir Richard Branson, it's the clever new way to send money abroad. You see, technology's moved on. Money transfers just don't need to cost so much anymore. No skyscrapers, no fancy suits, no hidden fees.
This startup, less than 4 years old, recently obtained 58 million euros from some major investors. Today, the company's quoted value is estimated at over $1 billion. Estonia's confidence is based on more than just these successful exits. The country's revolutionary vision on education also contributes. All Estonian children are taught computer programming from a very young age.
I was taught how to program when I was 13 years old, which was 48 years ago. I had a math teacher who thought it would be interesting to see if 13-year-olds could do programming. But anyway, the main thing I got out of that was that I never feared computers. And so many, many years later, when Estonia became independent, we were very poor, small. Everyone was way ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And we were on a level playing field in one place, that was IT.
Kohtadele, valmis, läks!
Estonia had the huge advantage that they were rebooting after the Soviet occupation. In 1991, they were able to start from scratch. They didn't have these legacy systems that we have. Our big companies and big government departments are sometimes still using mainframes dating from the 60s and 70s. And I think they saw this as a way of leapfrogging the rest of the world. One of the great advantages of the internet is it doesn't matter if you're small, that you can scale very, very quickly. And they saw with Skype that you could have a good idea in Estonia and suddenly it becomes the world telephone system, in effect. And I think they see opportunities which bigger countries and older countries perhaps don't see.
From there on, I think there's been an ethos here that you can do really big things, even if you're from, this tiny little country no one's ever heard of, or if they've heard of, they don't really know anything about. That, in fact, if you apply yourself, you can do things.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear investors, welcome to the 21st Seed Forum in Tallinn. It's a pleasure to see all of you again. And for those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome to the center of the world, at least today. The first exciting investment opportunity today is results on air from Tallinn, presented by one of its partners, Kristo Pajust. Kristo, welcome to Seed Forum.
Are you nervous for today, for the pitch?
Not really.
I want to say I've pitched enough where I'm not nervous, but of course, whenever you're out presenting, it's always some kind of nervous. Thank you, Steinar. So I want you to imagine you have just completed your favorite physical activity. And notice how sweaty you are.
Sorry, how much money are you looking for actually?
About 60,000, but realistically, if we're going for like the real seed round, then 750,000.
150,000.
150,000?
Yes, for pilots and Dragon, and then at least 500,000 again later this year.
No, osad on jah iga asja kaotatakse kohtusse.
The Estonians have got a great spur, which is that they've spent 50 years isolated and stagnating and occupied, so they feel they really need to catch up. So they've got almost the sort of what you see in East Asia, this desire to catch up the West, and they're in the West, but they really want to catch up with the rich countries of Europe that weren't occupied, because they feel that they want to get to where they deserve to be.
But their great neighbour, Russia, is never far behind. The history of Estonia is marked by a long series of invasions by superpowers overrunning this small country time and again. In 2007, the statue of a Russian soldier, a memorial from the Second World War, was moved. This caused massive upheaval among the Russian minority in Estonia.
Well, Estonia was occupied by the Soviet Union in 1940, and the Russian troops didn't leave till 1994. And so for every Estonian, this is the geopolitical fact number one, that they have a neighbour that doesn't really recognise their independence or doesn't really respect their sovereignty, and is menacing them with propaganda and subversion and all sorts of other things.
Nationalisten in Estland proberen een rouwkrans van prikkeldraad te leggen bij de soldaat die voor hen het symbool is van 50 jaar Sovjet-terreur.
Het bronzen beeld van een soldaat van het Rode Leger stond in het centrum van de stad, maar de regering wil het op een minder prominente plek zetten.
Физически, да, на самом деле, наши власти, они не могут защитить нашу память.
Het Kremlin waarschuwt de Esten dat een conflict met het buurland Rusland onvermijdelijk is als de bronzen soldaat van het Rode Leger sneuvelt. Een tweede nacht met rellen in Tallinn, de hoofdstad van Estland. Bendes, Russische jongeren gaan het gevecht aan met de politie.
Возмущены тем, что происходит в Таллине. Особенно нас возмущает тот факт, что в ходе разгона манифестации у памятника солдату-освободителю погиб наш соотечественник. Мы в резкой и решительной форме потребовали от эстонской стороны предоставить всю необходимую информацию, провести расследование и наказать виновных.
Soon after that, Estonia was hit by cyber attacks. No one was ever able to prove who had launched them, but all suspicions fell on Russia.
One of the problems with the internet is that attribution is very difficult. Yeah. But I think very few people think it was anybody else than Russia. Mm-hmm. And the Russians don't really deny it. They were trying to intimidate Estonia.
The DDoS attack, which stands for Distributed Denial of Service, all it means is you overload a server so you can't access it. So you have a key to your house, you want to get into your door. Unfortunately, there are 1,000 people between you and the door, and you just can't get through.
And this had a very bad effect. It meant that Estonia couldn't communicate with the outside world properly. Mm-hmm. It had a bad effect on the banking system. The emergency services briefly were within minutes of not working at all.
We couldn't have access to things that we had come to rely on. So newspapers, banks, government services. I mean, we were far less reliant in 2007 than we are in 2015. But at the time, well, you go, can't get into the newspaper. What's happening? I cannot, get into my bank account.
This is very, very, very small attack, actually. But people suddenly realize that the effects are massive. And if this lasts for days, imagine what happens then. And if we are in a cashless society, like some, banks have dreamed up of, hey, let's forget the cash. Let's use only bank cards. What's going to happen then? How are you going to buy food? How are you going to buy medicine? How are you going to pay for something that you need some kind of a service, So it kind of like gave us a little preview of the dangers that getting too attached to everything electronic can have. It can turn ugly very, very fast.
And now we will ask you to wear these t-shirts. Tema juba sai. Okay? And if you wish, toilet is over there. You can change there. And then we ask you to come back here. And Jana will take a picture.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
After the 2007 digital attacks, Estonia put cybersecurity high on its agenda. One of the organizations used to protect the country is the Cyber Defense League, a network of hackers and IT specialists who act as a voluntary cyber army.
The idea behind that was that we create a separate cyber defense unit in Defense League, which is based solely on volunteers. Because not every IT guy wants to run around with uniforms and, fight with weapons. Some of them are pacifists, more or less. Their life cycle or day-night cycle is different sometimes. But we want to utilize that because we don't see any problem in that if you don't want to fight with weapon, you don't want to be on a front line, then we have a second front line with an IT and IT solutions we are using as a government. So we need to defend that also.
Today, the cyberspace is not only a playground for petty criminals, but has become the fifth domain of warfare. This new battleground is more crowded than ever, spanning from DDoS attacks to advanced persistent threats that can harm us years before being discovered.
Cyber incidents happen every day, all the time. So this is the background noise. We have kind of grown accustomed to it, to live in this dangerous environment. And there are only a few that manage to break that threshold. That doesn't mean that the ones that we don't talk about don't exist or that they are not dangerous. It's just that we kind of have gotten used to them.
So this is a new vulnerability for Estonia since they're going online?
It is certainly something that Estonians take seriously. Yes, we are quite heavily dependent on IT. We recognize that, and this is why we do things like this Cyber Olympics, for example, to train the workforce to be able to defend it better.
These are the new soldiers at the front who will defend the country in case of a future cyber attack. The Tallinn University of Technology organises Olympiads where new talents are selected for this virtual front line.
If you have a power station, someone sends a missile and it hits the power station, it is an act of war. You know where it came from, you know who did it more or less, probably, and you know it is considered an act of war, and then sort of according to NATO, you have Article 5, an appropriate proportional response, Now, you don't need a missile. You have a cyber missile. It comes in and it destroys the power plant. Now, who did that? You don't know who did that. I mean, you can guess. And what is the appropriate response or proportional response to the same thing that, is done with a rocket, except it's done with a worm? These are all vulnerabilities we did not have before. We don't have an answer in Estonia, but we think about these things.
We see that you are not taking your network seriously. we will launch the largest cyber attack that Estonia has ever seen. We attack all your sites and will start as soon as possible. Expect us soon.
If there is a cyber war, there is no really soldiers fighting each other. I think the first one who gets hit are the general population. And the cyber war, maybe there is less casualties in the first day or second day, but the aftershock will be much worse. If, let's say, if someone takes down a whole country, isolates them from internet, takes down their communication systems in an entire country, it will be a massive chaos. It will probably, more people will die than in just regular fighting. Everything goes down. Medicine, schools, hospitals, pharmacies, banks, and so on and on and on and on. Everything stops working. That's it. And if it's a cashless society, then everybody's broke also.
Nothing you can do, right?
Nothing you can do. And you don't have the paper trail to figure out what belongs to someone. And then we're going to have internal wars and warlords and so on and on, and this can get really out of hand. And I think this is something that we should really look at it and really think, what are the backup systems, or how can we back it up?
If you don't have the structures and the services anymore in the real world, then what are you going to do?
There's a lot of very great thinkers in the world that have said this countless times, that we really have to figure out how to pack up this data so it can be read without electronic systems. And we should really be, printing out basically everything.
That's the solution.
That's the craziest thing, but that's how it actually works. The only way we know how to store data so you can read it with, I don't know, within a candlelight, or by the fire is, printed on a paper.
Go back to the paper world.
We're not going to scratch it into stone now, are we?
Because we're so data dependent today, and we don't, all of us in the world, so you want to have multiple copies in different places. We now are in the process setting up digital embassies, meaning servers that contain all of our national data. But the real issue, of course, which I think people have not paid enough attention to, is not privacy, but actually, it's a different term, is data integrity. To put it kind of in sort of simple terms, ultimately, I don't really care if someone knows I have type AB blood. Well, okay, it's a little private. I really care if they change my blood type and my records. That's what is so. Or to put it a different way, ultimately, someone looks at your bank account. You may be bothered by someone looking at the numbers in your bank account, but you really are bothered if someone changes the numbers in the bank account, especially if they change it lower, of course, and take the money.
Is that something that you are concerned about?
Well, I think you have to be if you deal with IT. You have to think about your vulnerabilities.
But Estonia wouldn't be Estonia if they hadn't turned this into a unique selling point too.
Cyber defense is an area where is growth, which is interesting and which provide a lot of career opportunities and interesting pathways for your future. It's also an environment where business opportunities and innovation is booming. So if you go back to your classrooms on Monday, then we want you to start thinking of potential startups that you can create, and Estonian Ministry of Defence is here to assist you and help you.
Economic and political success is the best national defence, and so every Estonian wants the country to be secure and stable and prosperous, and that's all very important. And they're also the home of the NATO Cyber Defence Centre, so they are contributing to the whole of NATO in terms of the expertise that they offer on this.
Here, at this strategic place at the northeasternmost tip of Europe, close to the Russian border, the whole Western world is gathering to prepare for a possible cyber attack.
And then the e-residency programme also just slightly broadens the base of support they've got, because it brings in people from all sorts of other places in the world who will know about Estonia, and if the headlines say that Estonia is being attacked by Russia,
they will scream.
They will scream.
They will help them to protect their...
At least from a soft power point. It's part of Estonia's soft power.
What made this little former Soviet republic, poor, many ways backwards 25 years ago, an IT powerhouse that everyone sort of, looks at, what are you doing? It's because technology developed so rapidly. And we could, in 5 years' time, we could be backward again if we don't keep running. We have to keep running. Europe needs to run, is the problem. The rest of Europe needs to run, because everyone else is running.
Obviously, if you want to die for Estonia, you will die on Estonian territory. If you want to marry an Estonian, you have to meet the Estonian first before you marry them. If you want to eat Estonian food, you have to do it. Someone has to cook it, so there still very much is a physical Estonia. But if you want to defend Estonia, you can defend Estonia in cyberspace. If you want to engage socially with Estonians, you can do that with your e-residency card, and you can do that from anywhere in the world.
E-residency and things like it allow me to be in existence with the rest of the world, connected. And that part is, I think, far more important than lines dividing states and countries.
Tere! Ma võtan üks kohvi, palun. Üks cafe latte. Cafe chai latte, palun. Kas sul on donuts by any chance? Donuts? No?
If I ask you, what is your identity? What is your identity then?
Wow, that's always been a funny question. My identity, I would start with the sort of traditional answer of like my bloodline, and that's going to be Persian. That's my family roots. In terms of the nation I belong to, and I suspect I'll spend the rest of my days, is the U.S. That's home sweet home. I don't see that changing. I love it there, and I'm so grateful to that nation for being my home and home to my parents. So I have that, but those are questions. That question is one I tend to even avoid, only because I belong to the world. I love traveling. I can't imagine myself pegged into a single nation or single city or anything like that. So my traditional answers, while they sound poetic, thank you. They ultimately, they're not as important as belonging, I think, to the world and being part of an entire civilization, right?